So I just axed most of the Airbnb units in my portfolio, and in this video I want to show you why, as well as give you my take on the short-term rental market as a full-time real estate investor. But before we do, I want to take you over to my top performing short-term rental. I'm going to show you around a little bit while we get into the details. Wait a minute. How'd you get in already? That is weird. I'm gonna have to change this keypad code now. Well, alright. Give me a minute and let me get set up and then we'll get into the video. Just give me a minute. Alright, now I get you guys set up so you can kind of see part of the unit. We're on the first floor of 3 floors. And this is a 3-floor, 1-bedroom, 2 full bath unit. We're just outside of Boston here. We've had this property since 2019 and it's consistently been one of our best earners. I want to get into that a little later, but for now, if you're new to the channel, I'm Tyler, founder of Roam Rich. Started as a W-2 employee, moved on to be a 1099 contractor, then I went on to start my own business and eventually ended up as a full-time investor. At Roam Rich, our goal is to spread financial intelligence to the masses. So if you like money hacks, real estate advice, alternative investments, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, because we're going to be putting out anything really to make your financial future brighter. So the backstory here is that between 2018 and 2021, we either converted some of our long-term units or acquired new properties specifically to be short-term rentals, bringing our total unit count to 8. Now these units were absolute cash cows for a few years. It seemed like anything we put on that was even like slightly above average than what was already on Airbnb was just killing it. Like high rates, high occupancy. It was really an easy and lucrative investment. It was such a good earner that my wife was able to quit her corporate role and come over and run these short-term rental units full-time. Now, I will say that we treat short-term rentals very much as a business, like outside of our other investments. We don't do it just like as a part-time hobby. Like we're experienced, we're knowledgeable, we've been operating for a while, we've done over 1 million in total bookings. We have a 4.86 out of 5-star rating across all the properties, and we have over like 985 property reviews. And we utilize a bunch of third-party apps for like guest management, pricing, occupancy, things like that. And I'm not saying this to brag, I just want to show you that like we are very much full-time invested in short-term rentals. And we still struggle to make a bunch of them work. So in the rest of this video, I want to get into the top 4 risks that I see with the short-term rental space today. This is coming from my viewpoint. So I see things in our market, which is New England, and within my portfolio, I talk to a bunch of other operators. So this is just kind of like what I'm experiencing and what I'm hearing anecdotally, but I do think they're really relevant to the space today and need to be talked about, whether you are owning and running short-term rentals now, or you're looking to buy one in the future. These are really good points to keep in mind. So my number 1 risk for short-term rentals in 2024 is competition. We've known for years that short-term rental supply has been increasing, but we thought with our operational effectiveness, we could kind of hedge that by making sure our properties were ranked higher and rated higher on Airbnb. But I think it's reached a point now where the market is just so saturated that no matter what you do, there's just so much inventory out there. And as you can see in this chart from AirDNA, supplies continue to increase steadily from 2018 with some big spurts in 2022 and 23. And I feel like this has resulted in lower rental rates and occupancy pretty much across the board. In this next chart, you can see the dramatic decline in occupancy, which has pretty much happened since 2021. And now it's back to hovering around that 55% occupancy level, which for a lot of operators is just not enough to make it worth it. So this is just some Econ 101 stuff here, typical like supply and demand dynamics, shifting in the short-term rental market as a whole. And I would guess every operator has felt this to an extent. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that the hot market of 21 and 22 was going to continue forever. And as an investor, I always expect change. I'm going to have to pivot when necessary. But as much as a bummer as the market is now, there's some additional reasons outside of just market dynamics why we're exiting the short-term rental space, and I'm going to get into those next. My number 2 risk, and pretty much the top risk going on outside of just normal market conditions, are regulatory changes in the short-term rental space. We've seen it happen in New York City, where they implemented this citywide, super strict ban on all units, even if you're owner-occupied. With housing affordability at all-time highs, short-term rental units have been thrust into the spotlight because they eliminate what would be a long-term accommodation for a resident, and it therefore contributes to the overall housing affordability crisis. Now, whether you agree with it or not, it's a hot-button issue that it's easy for policymakers to take action on through bans, restrictions, additional taxes, whatever they choose to do. And as housing affordability continues to be an issue, banning short-term rentals is an easy win for lawmakers, as they can get some long-term units back onto the market with very little cost and pushback, even though it's definitely not the answer to affordability as a whole. Just easy for them because they have something to show for their actions. So for this reason, I think regulatory risk is the number 1 problem with short-term rental investments, because you're taking a huge chunk of capital to buy the property, time and effort to run it, and your projected returns could be non-existent if your area becomes regulated. This is why it's as important as ever to have a backup plan for long-term rentals if this happens to your investment. It's easier said than done, because in this environment, long-term cash flowing investments are super hard to find with mortgage rates the way they are. Now, the only way I see to truly avoid this risk is to invest in areas that are already short-term rental friendly, like true vacation destinations. I mean, one area comes to mind for me. I went there a couple years ago, Kauai. It's an island in Hawaii, and they have these zones, these short-term rental, like tourist designated zones where you can buy a house or a condo, and it is okay to short-term rent them. And those rules have been enacted recently, so it shows that that is kind of their sentiment towards short-term rentals. And lastly, on this point, I don't know if it falls under true regulatory risk, but it's in the ballpark, is how close your neighbors are, or how many neighbors you have from your short-term rental property. And I point this out because if you have some troublesome neighbors who don't approve of a short-term rental, they can easily report you to the local authorities. I've run into this situation a few times because short-term rentals are extremely unpopular with permanent residents, and some won't hesitate to report you. So this is a concern because sometimes, even though there are regulations in place, enforcement is lax unless your property is on the radar in situations like this. So the next risk I see with short-term rentals in 2024 is the type of property you have, or the type of property you're thinking about buying. In our case, we bought when the market was on the rise, and basically everything we put on Airbnb was nearly fully occupied and making great money. And at the time, we weren't thinking about investing in these high-end, amenity-packed places. Instead, we bought like nice places that just needed cosmetic upgrades, as that seemed to be the best value play at the time. However, with increased competition now, the top like 5 to 10% of listings are the ones getting most of the bookings. So in hindsight, I really wish we went for those higher end properties when we had the chance, because they were still reasonably priced back then. Now, if you have one of these high end listings, congrats, you may not be feeling the pain as some other operators are. But for those looking to buy a short-term rental, definitely keep this in mind, because the amenities and quality matter almost as much as the location does in this market. Now, like I said before, this is why I chose to shoot this video in the Lighthouse. It's one of our best performing listings. It's super unique. Like I said before, it has 3 floors. It's an open 1-bedroom with 2 full baths. It has water views, which I'm not sure if you can see behind me, but they are out there. They're not far from the house. It's about a 2-minute walk to the beach. It's an 8-minute walk to the subway, and you're downtown Boston in about 25 minutes. So we always intended for this to be a short-term rental from the outset, just based on how many boxes it checked. And to this day, it's one of our most booked listings by far. So you can see how those aspects kind of create a high floor for bookings, and you can bank on some consistency when you nail the amenities and location. I will say that even though this does well as a short-term rental, I actively advertise it monthly, and if I get a certain dollar amount that allows me to keep my margins, I will gladly take it off Airbnb and rent it monthly. So the last short-term rental risk I see in this current market is just good old rising costs. So thanks to inflation, almost every aspect of operating Airbnb is more expensive, like supplies, just hourly rates for cleaners, utilities, insurance, taxes, and specifically on property taxes. With real estate values now so much higher, local municipalities are looking to raise tax revenue by reassessing homes to the current market value. And I know this firsthand because I've had 2 properties get reassessed within the last year, and they about doubled in value since the last time they had that assessment done. So this means that my taxes will be much higher because that basis is so much higher that they calculate it off of. And this topic really isn't being discussed nearly enough because it affects all homeowners, like not just investors. It affects anyone who owns property in that area because their values will rise and so will their taxes. The good thing is that there's some protections built into those reassessments that limit the dollar amount of tax increases, so some will be affected less than others. And if you're interested, I've linked a good article in the description below if you want to know more about that. So that concludes my list of the top current risks that I'm seeing in the short-term rental space. For 2024, I'm looking to rent either monthly or long-term about 6 out of 8 short-term rental units and take them off the Airbnb platform. It's gotten to a point where they're just either too risky or the margins don't make sense for the time and effort they require. Now personally, if I'm not making at least a 20% premium over long-term rents, then short-terming is just not worth it. And as an added kicker, I generally feel better about renting long-term because those tenants are more invested in the area and the rates are much more affordable for them, and it eliminates all the headaches and risks that come with short-term rentals. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you found it interesting, I'd highly recommend another video that I did previously where I highlight our short-term investment in Vermont since 2020. I go into some financials and then some mistakes I made along the way, so it could be useful as an additional resource to this video. And again, please like and subscribe to the Roam Rich channel for all things financial intelligence. And if I can ask you a favor, if you wouldn't mind leaving some feedback. If you like these videos, I can keep doing more of them. If you don't, I can go in a certain different direction if that's what you need. I'm looking for some feedback, and I want viewer feedback to kind of help drive the content in this channel. So I really want to put out things that you're interested in, so if you could help me out, it'd be awesome. So thanks for watching, and again, thank you for working with us.